welcome back, everyone. Now, today, you've heard a lot of information about the SBIR and STTR programs, and hopefully you've had a chance now to talk to some of our agency representatives. At NMFAST, we always highlight the differences that agencies leverage across the SBIR and STTR programs. So knowing that information is critical to figuring out your own pathway through these funding opportunities. One thing to keep in mind is that these programs evolve over time. So the information you have now is not necessarily static. The current SBIR program is radically different from the same program that started at NSF nearly 40 years ago. But how have these programs changed? What are the evolutions they have gone through? Why do they continue to change? We will address some of these questions in the next panel, moderated by Karen Medina, Procurement Advisor at NMPTAC. Karen is a certified public procurement officer with more than a dozen years of experience in state and local government purchasing and is a graduate of New Mexico State University with degrees in human resource management and economics. Now, prior to joining PTAC, she worked on several years in purchasing at the City of Las Cruces as a senior buyer and was promoted to purchasing manager, where she oversaw a $70 million budget for purposes of obtaining goods and services on behalf of the city. She also executed the city's procurement contracts. She will be joined today by panelists Dr. Henry Ahn, Jim Greenwood, Elden Hawkes, and Dr. Matt Willis. And as a reminder for attendees, we are trying to leave time for Q&A, so feel free to send in questions using that Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. It likes to hide if you're not hovering over it. Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Garrett. And as Garrett said, I'm Karen Medina, and I work for the New Mexico Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Our program helps small businesses navigate government contracting. That's the whole point of the PTAC, really. It was started in 1986 by the Department of Defense under the DLA, Defense Logistics Agency. So we like to think that we are lending a hand to small businesses who want a piece of the government contracting pie. It sometimes is harder for them to compete. But with PTAC's help, we've seen some great success. So as Garrett also mentioned today, we will be discussing how the SBIR program over the last 40 years has evolved and changed. And we have several panelists here who are going to help with that discussion. So let's just get started in letting them introduce themselves and give a little bit of their background. Let's start with Henry. Henry, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you, Karen. My name is Henry Ahn. I'm with the SBIR-STTR program at NSF. I've been here for about 5.5 years now, and I handle the biomedical technologies topic. As most of you probably know, NSF is primarily a funding agency, so there is no internal research. We do provide funding, mostly for academic institutions. About 3% of our budget goes out to for-profit companies within our SBIR-STTR program. We're also technology agnostic, so as long as the company is working on developing innovative technology with commercial potential, there is a fit somewhere within our program. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Henry. And next, how about we go with Matthew Willis?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity. So I'm Matt Willis. I work for the Army, specifically, of course, in the DoD. It's always alphabet soup, but the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. And so within that office, I am the director for the Army's applied SBIR program. So what does that mean? It's a customer-focused SBIR program where we are trying to inject innovation into Army systems to really provide the greatest technologies for our customer, the soldier. So one thing that is unique within the Department of Defense writ large as compared to like the National Science Foundation is not only are we investing in innovation, but we also have other components of the Army that are our customers. So we're really looking at an end-to-end approach for identifying the right technologies, investing in firms to generate those technologies, and then identifying customers across the Army that can buy, equip, and deploy these technologies. So, we're really looking at leaning forward, developing a more business-friendly approach to the SBIR program, and again, really trying to reduce time to capital, incentivize rapid contracting, and ensure that we are finding the greatest technologies for our soldiers. So thanks again, looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Matt. Let's go to Elden Hawkes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elden Hawkes. I'm with the Office of Investment and Innovation at the Small Business Administration. I serve as the Partnership and Innovation Specialist. I always forget my title. I've been in SBIR as TTR for just under 10 years. It'll be 10 years exactly in a month, actually, now that I think about it. But for the past 2 years, I've been with SBA as the program manager for the Federal and State Technology Partnership Program. That is a competitive cooperative agreement program where we fund state organizations to offer assistance to organizations, companies, innovators that are looking to apply for SBIRSTTR awards. Previous to my time at SBA, I was the program specialist and program manager for the USDA's SBIR program.
Great, thank you, Eldon. And last we have Jim Greenwood.
Thanks, Karen. Welcome everyone this afternoon. Well, I guess as you can tell by the gray hair, I'm the grandfather of the organization. I've been involved in SBIR for 39 years. So Karen says it's been around 40. I was a little bit late coming in, but came in 1983, actually as an applicant. And I wrote down my various roles over the years: applicant, advocate, promoter, trainer, reviewer, both at NSF and for the Army Quality Awards, coach, and consultant. Now, you notice recipient is not one of the categories there, and that's another story we can have, but at least an applicant. For the past 25 years, I've been doing this through Greenwood Consulting Group, which, as you can tell by the name, is our own business. My wife and I own it, under contract with various organizations currently, including the University of Texas System, the DOE Phase Zero program, New York University Entrepreneur Center, and even the Wyoming SBIR outreach program. Believe it or not, I'm actually a native New Mexican, and I know you're skeptical of that because I said I do work for a University of Texas System, and we all know what that relationship is there. But it's a good group to work with, and have enjoyed that. And I just don't tell them to take themselves too seriously.
All right, thank you, Jim. So now we're ready for our discussion points, and I'm just going to launch into some questions. We've got several here. We'll see what we get to, but I'll start with the first one. And on this one, I'm going to have Jim Greenwood talk first, and then the others can chime in with their talking points as well. So here's the first question. So we talked about how these programs evolve over time, but I would like each of you to tell me the most surprising change that you've seen the SBIR or STTR programs undergo, and why did it surprise you? So Jim, go ahead and get started. The others, you just, jump in at will. Okay,
Karen. I pondered this one for a while and came back with the diversity of the various agencies, SBIR, STTR programs. There's always been some diversity, but it's just gotten more radical over time, and it seems to be getting more and more so all the time. The advantages, and I'll talk more about this later, the advantages, I think this is the agencies customizing SBIR, STTR to their needs, and it's a sign of maturity that the programs are finally being considered serious parts of their agencies. The downside is that it's become more difficult for those of you who are newcomers or relatively fresh to SBIR, STTR to not only understand the differences from agency to agency, but to be able to stay on top of it. So I guess the surprise element was that each agency seems to be really going off on its own, and I think even within DoD, the individual components going off on their own And it concerns me that there may be a loss in that of understanding how difficult that becomes for the newcomers to participate in these programs.
I'll just add in there. So I appreciate that comment, Jim. So because you're right, within the Department of Defense, there is a tremendous amount of change. But one of the things that I would add, which I would say, response to the question is that, historically, I think a lot of times the approach has been that this SBIR acquisition strategy defines innovation. Vice, what we're really trying to push, and I'm trying to push in the Army, is that the innovation should define the acquisition strategy. So what does that mean? I'm not trying to speak government speak here, right? But the SBIR program has a tremendous amount of flexibility. They provide a tremendous amount of flexibility to agencies regarding resourcing requirements, the schedule, performance, et cetera. So, we're really looking and leaning forward to ensure not only that there's a need, but there's a need and a transition opportunity for small businesses so that we can get beyond doing research for the sake of research, right? And invest in technologies that are going to benefit our customer. And so I'd say that's our vision for the change, but understood it can be confusing, and we're working on our messaging for the innovators and the small businesses out there to be more transparent and as simple as possible. Over.
Yeah, as for NSF, I wouldn't say the changes are really surprising, but if we look at the trend, from what I hear 10 plus years ago, it wasn't unusual for us to have repeated SBIR awardees. So we've had many companies that may have gotten SBIRs in the past, still winning additional SBIRs to do additional work. And if we look at the companies that were awarded with phase one from NSF in the last several years, I think close to 3/4 of all these phase one awardees are more or less 3 years or younger. So we're going kind of more toward earlier stage companies that are working on developing their initial core intellectual property that may be significant. It's a do or die type of technology. This technology will either make or break the company. And I think NSF over time has started to focus more on these earlier type of technologies. Those companies that have been around for much longer, I think they're having to really put in some additional justification as to why this phase one funding from NSF can potentially catalyze their work and get the company to that next level, next inflection point. I think I would say that's probably one of the bigger changes over time, but I think it kind of happened gradually, so people may not have noticed all that much. In terms of of implementing some new programs, I think within NSF, these are all nothing new either, because we do discuss quite a bit before we implement anything. We have a project pitch process where companies do submit something, and we provide them with some immediate feedback to help them understand whether there's a fit or not even before they submit a full proposal. And that process is really not new either. It's something we've kind of taken executive summary from these companies in the past, not requirements, but companies were allowed to send those executive summary to receive some form of feedback, but we formalized that process so that companies know exactly who to reach out to after submitting a project pitch. When they hear back, they'll know exactly who to reach out to ask questions. And another change that we have is we've gone from having 2 deadlines a year to having multiple proposal submission windows. We call them submission windows because they're not really deadlines. Companies can technically submit a proposal anytime throughout the year. We've had companies where 5 o'clock on the day of the deadline comes and they're struggling to submit, they're having some issues with the system, and they say, hey, I couldn't submit it, I missed it by a few minutes. They can't submit it after 5 p.m., but after midnight, another submission window opens and they can just come right back and submit their proposal again and for consideration. So in some ways, we discussed quite a bit internally to make things a little more flexible. I think Matt was using the term flexibility. And so having more flexibility to allow companies to submit, go through the process, be considered for funding. And I think those are some of the, I guess, reasons why some of those changes came about, and we had to implement some of these additional things.
Just try to be really brief. I just want to echo very much what's been said. Really, for me, the surprising part is not so much of that has changed, but in my opinion, how much has changed. You know, government is always thought to move very slowly, but overall, just SBIR has grown incrementally, but it's been very quick, in my opinion, especially in the past 5 years ago or so. My time at USDA, there were many projects that were funded, say, before 2012 when I started, that would have never been funded in 2014, 2015, 2016 because of the shift in the focus on the technology and also commercialization that the program really had during that time. And then even with additions legislatively, as far as TAB and things of that nature, you've seen agencies really work to utilize those to really make their programs more robust. In my opinion. So in that case, it was very quick in my opinion. So that's probably most surprising to me, how fast things moved, considering it's what, 40 years almost, and you've had so much change just in the past 10.
Great, thank you, all of you. Now let's move on to the next question here. On the topic of changing up the program, many agencies seem to be doing just that over the past 3 or 4 years. NSF introduced the project pitch and the quarterly windows. Air Force changed their BAA to a CSO and introduced pitch days. NOAA moved from a contracting agency to a granting agency. Army having dual priorities between ASA and AFC, the list goes on. It definitely begs the question, what is the purpose of changing these programs over time, and why does it happen? So Matt, let's start with you.
Oh yes, no, I appreciate that. And so it's interesting, talking about change, right? So the Army itself is obviously an organic organization. We're changing. And so actually in the past 2 years or so, we've undergone the biggest organizational change in 40 some odd years with the stand-up of Army Futures Command. And so why did the Army stand up Army Futures Command? It was really to try to be at the forefront, at the edge of innovation and modernization for the Army. And so that sort of organizational and fundamental shift in focus for the Army on cutting edge innovation really precipitated this strategic shift for the Army's SBIR program to focus on different components of our customer base. So be it more fundamental research to support lab and future capabilities, or to support our program executive offices, our PMs, and larger Army systems that are being developed. But I think fundamentally the rationale for why the program continues to evolve is really to stay relevant, right? I mean, so we want to tap into innovation that's happening in the private sector, where the private sector has unparalleled expertise, where the Army does not have those organic capabilities, right? And we see the SBIR program as a fabulous way to do that, where the Army can remain relevant, we can tap into innovation that's already happening, and we can use that innovation to improve Army systems for our soldiers.
With our SBIR program, I mean, as we work with different companies, our reviewers, and listen to all the things that people go through, and we discuss internally to see how we can do things a little better. And I think that's one of the reasons why we periodically implement these different changes. So with the project pitch process, I mentioned earlier that if people used to email us the executive summary. They don't know whether we're the program director that'll be processing their proposal. Sometimes they'll email 10 different of us separately and expect to hear something back, which the feedback may not be as, maybe as meaningful. But having this separate project pitch process allowed us to kind of increase efficiency with these type of interactions. When companies submit, they don't have to worry about which topic fit. I mean, we fund just about everything. That does make it a little more complicated for us. But when they submit, we'll review the project pitch. And if we believe that it's a better fit under another topic, we'll move it around internally. And then when a company hears back, they'll know exactly which topic that the proposal will be reviewed under and who is the program director that'll process that proposal. So they know exactly who to contact to have their questions answered. So it allowed the company to at least have a go-to person and understand who they need to contact to get the most pertinent answers to the questions that they may have specific to the topic. And with the submission windows as opposed to deadlines, we've had so many companies that come back after 5 p.m. They missed the deadline. They're asking, well, do we have to wait another 6 months before we can submit this proposal and get this reviewed? There's no need to worry. They missed the deadline. It's still open. The system will, the next day, will through another submission window, they can submit their proposal and be considered for funding. And sometimes we have companies that go through the whole review process, and at the end, they'll say something like, we've had that information. We were running out of time. We had to submit it quickly, so we're not able to include that certain information because of this time constraint. Now we tell companies, well, just submit whenever they're ready to submit. So our goal really is to get back to companies with the final decision on funding within 4 to 6 months of submitting the full proposal. So it does give companies a little more flexibility in terms of being able to gather all the information that they need to gather to submit a strong proposal that they need to. So I think over time, what we try to do, at least internally, as we have our weekly meetings, we, in addition to talking about other things that we may be going through, in addition to those things, we also do bring up some certain things that we may have heard from from companies or reviewers or whoever that may be, and we try to see if there are ways that we can do things a little better, more efficiently, and have the system be a little more flexible and allow companies to really be able to do things and be considered the best way possible.
I think that Matthew and Henry really touched on both of the points. One's really you had these changes because of the evolution of the agencies themselves, whether it's internal organizational restructuring or just the research priorities of the agency change from year to year or over the course of years based on their strategic planning and so on and so forth. So that's one reason why I say, particularly during my time at USDA currently has 10 different topic areas for their solicitation. Well, those top areas, depending on who's running things, may see different priorities based on USDA's research needs to change topic areas slightly. And in some cases, topic areas were added. And even before I arrived there, topic areas were removed because there wasn't a need or a demand from the community anymore for those topic areas. So that's one. And the second, particularly some of the things Henry touched on as far as solicitation dates, but even with the pitch, project pitches and pitch days, a lot of it's outreach, making the program more accessible, or at least more accessible and wide reaching to individuals who may not know about the program or may not have thought they had a chance to apply to the program as well. Even if they aren't successful, a lot of these sort of efforts are getting more and more individuals and more different types of technologies into the pipeline.
So I think a major change that I've seen literally over the decades is when Congress mandated SBIR, it was forced upon these agencies, and many of them were not happy about it. And in fact, the term tax was commonly used in describing SBIRSTTR. That's a tax on our R&D budget. And it was an attitude of, we're being forced to do this. We have to have this program, but we really don't believe in it. We really don't believe you small companies can contribute to our needs, but we're forced to do it. And over time, you don't hear the term tax anymore. People don't talk about tax. And I think you've seen the agencies more and more recognize the value of small companies. And Matt kind of touched on that, the value that the private sector can bring to the needs of an agency like the Army. And they've gotten to the point that some of them are actually advocates. And I would point to DOD as well as National Institutes of Health as both taking on a more a positive attitude as agencies. And you always get positive attitudes within the SBIR program in each agency, but looking at the broader agency, both DOD and NIH seem very supportive of SBIR and STTR and feel they're valuable to their agency. So that's a very positive change that I've seen over the years.
All right, thanks, guys. We'll move on to another question here. And by the way, we may have a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A. So if you have anything, questions, you can put them in the chat. We'll try to get to them at the end. But here we go with another question. So each of you have very different experiences with SBIR and STTR programs, and you have all seen some pretty unique changes with how these programs operate, even though a lot of these changes are to make a better competitive development landscape for awardees. What is one thing you think the SBIR STTR programs could do better and why? Let's go to Elden.
Outreach. That is one of the things that I've always said. SBIR is the best kept secret of the federal government, in my opinion. And a lot of it has been done over the years as far as outreach, especially managing the FAST program. You know, I work with organizations that are doing outreach, that are working with individuals. But even so, there's so many possible applicants who are not aware of the program whatsoever. One of the great things about things we've done pre-current conditions was the road tours that agencies went on, and we hopped on the bus and we went across the country, and we were able to talk with potential applicants there in person and even in various conferences. But even that only goes so far. Outreach is a struggle that all agencies have. Many agencies have limited, not limited budgets, but limited staffing. When I was at USDA, literally 3 main people who work with SBIR. Everybody else work with SBIR, but they still had other duties. So a lot of agencies are in that same boat, but really outreach is something that we can never, ever get to a point where you can always do better when it comes to outreach, that's what I say.
Yeah, I would say, in addition to outreach, I think being able to maybe work with some of the support groups, I think that's also very important. And it seems like New Mexico has a great program where you not only you address the outreach issue potentially, but also work with companies to strengthen their proposal. But as Elden mentioned, I mean, there's definitely not enough manpower for us to really help companies with the proposal writing process. We can try to help them understand and try to outline everything in that long, very detailed solicitation guideline that sometimes people do get confused. And I wish there were more groups out there that can assist these companies. And I wish there were ways that we can maybe implement some additional programs to help companies to maybe write a stronger or better proposal so that they don't feel like they have to go to a grant writer and pay them money to do this. I mean, I think those are good too if they can, work together effectively and have a grant writer be involved with the company. There's definitely nothing wrong with that. But I think just the companies being able to understand where to go and how to prepare a strong proposal, with or without the help of these other the grant writers, I think it's another thing that would be important for companies that we don't currently have.
I would point to the registrations as something that needs to be improved. Depending on the agency, it takes between 4 and 6 unique different registrations for a newcomer to get even capable of submitting a proposal for SBIR STTR. So somebody comes into me and they're brand new, they're thinking about starting a business. Well, you have to go get your tax ID number. Then you got to use that to try to get your DUNS number. By the way, the DUNS number is no longer being used. We're now using a unique entity identifier, but you'll have to get this through. Oh, and by the way, then there's SAM, got to get registered on SAM, and then there's grants.gov. Oh yeah, and then there's SBIR.gov, and they're just completely overwhelmed, and they haven't even started on the proposal yet. They're just trying to get registered, and it just seems like, and I know we're dealing with very distinct agencies with distinct requirements, but it just seems, and I'll put it on SBA, Elden, I'd love to see SBA just sit down with all the agencies and say, guys, how can we simplify this? Because some of those newcomers that I hear, Henry really wanting to get into the program and Matt wants to get involved in the program, this discourages them from having to go through such a complicated registration process. And it actually reinforces the good old boy network, because the good old boys, guess what? They're all registered. So they don't have to go through this. And they actually kind of like the fact that this registration process is real complicated because it keeps the newcomers out. Well, that's good for the good old boys, but I don't think it's good for SBIRSTTR, and I don't think it's good for the agency. So I would really push for some, we need another summit here, Karen, for SBA to get all the agencies together and say, how do we simplify this registration process?
So I guess I'll add what I thought would be the obvious answer for what the SBIR programs could do better, and it's it has to do with that, as Elden said, sometimes within the government, the workload associated with the SBIR program can be other duties as assigned. So, the common pain point that I see within the Army and DoD and government writ large is the pace of government contracting, of course. And of course, we can't fix that, but within the Army and within the DoD at least, I think we're working hard to recognize that the pace of government contracting is quite slow, and pushing as hard as we can to streamline requirements. As Jim was referring to, not necessarily in the registration side of the house, but how can we simplify the process for exercising awards and getting firms to on contract and executing as expeditiously and efficiently as possible. So, but it certainly is still an area for improvement, I would say. Over.
Okay, good. So we've got another question here. We do like to present both sides of the coin when we do these panels. So let's turn it over to the flip side. Given that there are still some challenges that exist, what do you really enjoy about the SBIRSTTR programs? And at the heart of it, what really excites you about being part of this innovation ecosystem? So Henry, let's start with you.
Yeah, for me, it's that constant learning, being able to interact with innovators out there. There are a lot of intelligent people with very interesting ideas, and going through the proposal and learning about all these new things that are coming up and people are working on. And to me, that kind of makes this job very exciting. So I've been doing this. Before doing this with the NSF, I was working as a kind of seed investor, early stage investor. I did that for 12 years before coming on to NSF, and I'm doing this for about 5.5 years with NSF now. So combined, kind of approaching 20 years, I guess, of working with companies that are at this stage, working with some form of innovative technology that addresses commercial need. And I still wake up in the morning, enjoy going to work, because it's always constant learning, and it's very interesting to go through this process. So I think that's one thing that I guess kind of when I'm asked that question, that's one thing that I think of. Many years ago, I had a friend, is an attorney. He was telling me that he quit his job because he woke up in the morning. He didn't enjoy going to work. He wanted to do something a little different. And he told me whenever that happened, he said he did that for 5 years. He was working for this law firm, and he carried it on for 5+ years before deciding to really change his job. And he was telling me that whenever that happens, he said, Henry, things are not going to change if you just keep doing what you do. So whenever you feel that way about a job, he said to just start looking at things immediately. There's no need to really look elsewhere. And I think I do kind of think about that a little bit periodically. And I think this is a job that really does make things exciting. It's never dull because there's always new things that come up.
I think I would point to the ability of just your average person on the street to be able to compete for and successfully compete for awards from the federal government. That at least my perception is a lot of government programs are very wired. They're bureaucratic. They favor the big guy. They favor the ones with lobbyists. And SBIR is not like that. SBIR is for the common guy or gal to come in with an innovative idea and potentially get funded and build a company around it. And I'll point quickly to in Albuquerque, some of you may know Ken and Kay Blimmel, who have, I believe they're owners of the management sciences company. Ken came to one of our workshops probably 15 years ago in Albuquerque. Knew nothing about SBIR, learned something about it, got excited, started competing, and now he has a very successful business built not around SBIR, but built on the basis of SBIR, and doing an awful lot of work for the Department of Defense right now. And it's really neat to watch that happen to, again, just a common guy on the streets of Albuquerque to get involved in these programs and get rewarded for his innovation and for his hard work.
So yeah, I will. I'll add on and echo what was just said. You know, for me, being able to, be in this constant learning mode, being at the forefront of understanding and learning, honestly, about the different innovations that are happening in the private sector. So as mentioned, for me personally, I got my PhD in chemical engineering many years ago. I worked in an Army lab for several years. For the last 5 or 6 years, I've been working, at the Pentagon in a, well, as Jim put it, a bureaucratic position, right, writing policy. And so for the past couple of years being involved in the SBIR program, I can sometimes pretend to be an engineer again, and it's been great. So absolutely love what we're doing, love the mission, really enjoy working with small businesses, and again, really seeing the fruition of seed funding with an SBIR project evolving into actual capabilities that are being deployed and helping our mission is extremely rewarding.
I'll say very much like everyone else. It's amazing to see just the common man, a business that just started up just for SBIR, then get their first award, then get a phase 2, then get commercialization, and end up having these great patents. Like, that is something that I don't think any program can really replicate, the sort of innovations that have come from the program. And then secondly, working with the ecosystem now in my current capacity, seeing the passion of the FAST organization, of the Catalyst organizations, in assisting companies with SBIR. They're just as passionate and as dedicated as any program manager, any agency, to the success of these applicants with SBIR. And that's something I really love as well.
Okay, great. So we're down to the last question here, and then we may get to a few of the questions that I see popping up in Q&A. So here's our last question. As we start to wrap up, there is one lingering question. Since today's topics have mostly focused on the SBIR and STTR programs and how they are an excellent conduit for innovation funding, if you could leave the audience with one key piece of information based on the biggest mistakes you have seen companies make, what would that piece of advice be? And you can start out, Jim.
Yeah, and it's pretty simple to me. It's follow the friggin' instructions, okay? And it seems so simple, and everybody, okay, that's it, and then everybody ignores it. It's like everyone gets so wound up on their innovation and their idea, and they start, the juices start flowing, and they kind of forget that there's a format that they're supposed to follow, and there's a set of forms they're supposed to send in, and there's a 5 p.m. local time deadline at NSF that they're supposed to meet, and they end up just throwing something together that doesn't get past who my stepson calls the rules police. And those are the folks in each agency that when the proposals come in, they go through it with a fine tooth comb and, does it check all the boxes? Is it the right font? Is it the number of pages? Did they sign off here? Is the budget there the same number as the budget on the other part? And I think, again, people get so excited about the innovation and they're just sure that Matt's gonna just ignore all the rules because he's so excited about their innovation. Well, no, you got to follow the rules because that helps set a level playing field. I had someone last week who went to condensed font. And I haven't seen condensed font in a while, but think of it as squishing font spaces together. And there were probably, what was it, Henry? I think the max is like 15 characters per inch, and this one was probably 20 characters per inch. And it was just crammed together and horrific to read. So first of all, they didn't realize they're making the reviewer's job hard, which is not a good thing to do. But second of all, if the agency allows them to cram so much more into their 15-page proposal, that's unfair to the people who followed the rules and kept it down to 15 characters or less per inch. So follow the rules. If you don't follow the rules, follow the instructions, you run a real good risk of your proposal being thrown out. All this hard work you put into it being for naught, particularly at somewhere like Matt's organization at Army, where a topic is offered one time and it's not offered again with a second chance. So please follow the instructions.
Yeah, I would say, go ahead, Elden, sorry.
Okay, no problem, thank you. Everything Jim said to a T, don't wait until the last minute. That's my first one. The second one is, and again, I'm getting on my program manager hat, utilize the assistance that's out there. You're here, the Arrowhead Center's conference right now. FAST organizations are there, Catalyst organizations are there. There are a lot of organizations that offer assistance free of charge. And go to SBIR.gov. You can find a resource tool there to locate assistance in your area, in your state. Right now, there are 33 different FAST organizations. Hopefully, we can increase that over time, but there are a lot of resources there. So make sure you utilize those resources as well.
Yeah, what Jim said and what Elden said, those are probably the two most important things. And I would say not as important, but still important, is to just go to our website and just read a little bit about our program before you engage with us. There were times that I saw a project pitch and there were some questions that I had, and sometimes it's a little easier to talk about it over the phone as opposed to try to exchange emails. So sometimes I pick up the phone and call people. And one time I called an entrepreneur who submitted a project pitch, and he got a little confused and he says, "So which agency are you with again? And can you remind me what project pitch I submitted?" So it turns out that he was submitting all the different type of information to a lot of different agencies. So in his mind, he wasn't really sure. He wasn't keeping track of all the different things that were submitted. And he wasn't sure exactly what NSF really, what type of project that we fund, the type of companies that we fund. And turns out this company was well over 20 years old. Over time, and this was primarily I guess an SBIR STTR granting company, so multi-million dollars over the years, and just looking for additional grant money to get the internal R&D running, and so I think when a company does a little bit of research and at least keep track of what type of information is being submitted to where, I think it does make the conversation go a little better, and at least it helps us to know that the company really does care about moving it forward, and I think have the conversation go a lot smoother along the way.
So yeah, I'm not certain I have much more else to add. I think those were all excellent points. I would just echo, stay engaged. So yes, we have a website, armysibir.army.mil. We also have profiles on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, still exists. But so, you know, don't assume the status quo. Follow us on social media and ask questions. You know, as Elden says, that there are resources out there. We provide resources. Other agencies provide resources. The SBA provides resources. Again, we're here to help. You know, of course, we have a mission to support our agency, but we're not going to be successful without you and without you being successful. So, so we're absolutely there to help.
That's great, guys. Thank you. And I'm going to look at the chat now and see. I think we have a couple of questions, so we may have time to just get to a few of these before our time is up. And let's see, we've got one here. What's the best way to inquire with NSF or the Army or any government agency about whether this is kind of hard for me to read it, whether a project idea would be viable for a grant or contract? Is it best to reach out on the website for each agency? So whoever wants to take that.
Yeah, for NSF, it's project pitch submission. That's the first step in the process. So once that's submitted, we'll be able to review and get back to you within 3 weeks. More often than not, it'll be much quicker than 3 weeks, but you'll hear back no later than 3 weeks from the time that the project pitch is submitted. And if it's an invite, then you'll know exactly which topic. If the topic that you selected to submit a project pitch is the same, you'll get to see that in the invite as well as also the program director who's in charge of that topic in case you have questions. So that really is the first step in the process.
Yeah, what I would say or add for the Army program is, yes, on our website we have all of our active topics that are open. There's also a historical record for the past couple of years, so that can at least give firms an idea of our priorities. There's also an opportunity on our website to submit a question, and we can certainly get back to you. We also host regular webinars to talk about different priorities, different changes in the program. So again, you can get access or be cognizant of all of those things if you follow our website or again, follow some of our social media platforms.
I would just encourage you to be learn as much, per Henry's earlier comment, as much about the agencies as you can before you engage with them and decide which one you might want to go with. You got night and day here, Army versus NSF, where Army, here's the need, here's what we're trying to solve. Can you solve our problem? Focus on the problem. Here's the problem. Address the problem. They tell you what the problem is. Solve the problem. Henry's over there going, we don't have any problems. We just have 24 topics, I think now, Henry, that cover literally the waterfront, everything you can imagine. And literally number 24 is other. So anything that doesn't fit in the other 23 you can always stick in other. So you can propose any topic to Henry, but Henry only wants to see the very revolutionary, state-of-the-art, unproven ideas. He wants to be funding that innovation, that early innovation, whereas Matt might be interested. I heard earlier that, gee, you got something already selling in the commercial sector to non-defense customers. We'd be interested in talking with you about that. So there's such variability across these 11 agencies that it's very challenging to just say, oh, I guess I'll go talk to USDA. They seem like nice people. Elden seems like a nice guy. Well, you really got to do a little homework. And I think Henry's idea is start with their website, see what they're saying about their program. Look for some introductory webinars. A lot of folks are doing those, and the SBIR.gov website lists many of those. Sit down a couple of webinars, start to understand the differences among the agencies, and just get as smart as you can about the agencies, and then reach out to them.
Jim, you stole my thunder. I was going to say go to.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're perfectly fine. SBI.gov. If you don't know which agency you want to apply to, You're going to find information about every single agency, all their solicitation. In addition, there are going to be videos on all the agencies, as well as tutorials about different steps of the SBIR application process as well. So if you don't know where to go, SBIR.gov should be one of your first places you go to find out information about all the agencies to begin your process.
Great. Okay, I got another question here. People are often confused when they hear that these are a 3-phase program, but only phase 1 and 2 are funded. Speaking of change, do you think there will ever be direct phase 3 funding under the SBIRSTTR programs?
That's easy for me. So there is no phase 3 with NSF. There is no federal procurement or anything like that with NSF. So there's always going to be phase 1, phase 2, and those supplements for phase 2 within the NSF's SBIRSTTR program.
I think phase 3 exists and was created primarily to emphasize that a successful SBIR is not just doing phase 1 and 2 and getting the R&D and the prototyping, but now doing something quote unquote useful with it, and that becomes phase 3. Now again, Henry's agency is interested in funding phase 1 and 2 and expects you to then reach out and find other funding to take the project forward from that point. Matt's organization and other contract agencies like NASA may very well have internal money that's not SBIR money, and that's what they bring to the table in phase 3. So again, big differences across the agencies, but I think there is some phase 3 funding in agencies like the military and NASA. It's just not SBIR funds. It's coming out of other pots of money.
Well, yeah, and so I would echo Jim, or what Jim just said, which is my goal actually, is to posture companies to get phase 3 awards, right? That's really the goal here, because that represents you have a customer that's not the SBIR program that wants the technology that you just made. And so they are willing to spend their additional research, development, test, and evaluation money or procurement or anything like that on actually taking the technology, getting it past the prototype and testing it or deploying it. And so the beauty or the benefit of getting to a phase 3 through the SBIR program, right, is that you have that sole source justification built in. So you have a competitive advantage to be able to actually take that technology and deliver it. Vice going through a traditional RFI through SAM.gov or beta.sam or through a traditional broad agency announcement. So there are certainly benefits of going through the SBIR program.
Okay, good. We got a couple more. Oh, did somebody have something? No? Okay. A couple more questions. Are there any additional changes that you foresee for the SBIRSTTR programs for Henry and Matt? Is there anything coming down the pipe attendees should be aware of?
And we have a new solicitation that is coming out shortly. I don't really think there will be any major changes from the current solicitation versus the new solicitation, but but we don't really have anything I would really see as a major change at this point. But just keep an eye on the website. And when a new solicitation gets published on the website, please go through the solicitation. Each solicitation does have some things that are maybe not as significant changes, but some changes from one to the other. So go through them. And if you have any questions, always reach out to us.
So yeah, I would say that the biggest changes within the Army is actually internal. So it should be transparent or maybe not apparent, I guess, to the audience here, but it's really all about driving efficiency into our program. So, we're really trying to centralize where we can and focus resources where we can to make the process for engaging with the Army pre-award, during the evaluation, and then post-award, getting companies on contract and executing the research as quickly and expeditiously as possible. So hopefully the audience will see those changes, the results of those changes, but from the BAA or from the announcement and the topics, it shouldn't be too substantial moving forward. But I would add the caveat that, again, we're constantly trying to stay relevant. So stay informed, and that there might be some changes. We'll see.
I would say the change that is already occurring at DoD, and you're going to see more of it, is greater use of the out-of-cycle solicitation. For a long time, DoD has put out 3 solicitations per year, and everyone just kind of waited for one of those to show up and look at the topics and respond to it by the deadline, and you're off and running. Well, now you've got what DARPA, Space Defense, or excuse me, Space Development Administration, and Army all have out-of-cycle, where they put out one solicitation, a master solicitation each year, and then pop out topics every once in a while. And you are to respond to those topics typically within 45 to 60 days of when they come out. AFWorks within Air Force, you're never quite sure what they're going to do. They're all constantly changing, but they tend to come up with their own solicitations. So I would strongly encourage anyone interested in the military, and that should be virtually any of you, because it's half of the SBIR program. Go on the DSIP, is it DSIP.gov website, I believe it is, Matt, Defense SBIR Innovation Portal website, and there's a listserv there. Sign up for that listserv. That is the only way you're going to stay, in my opinion, on top of the topics that are popping out of DoD, just at a very rapid pace, but not a very consistent pace. So I'm not a big fan of listservs because you get a lot of junk, but the DSIP listserv is vital if you're interested in the military.
Okay, great. Looks like we only have about 3 minutes left, which I think means only one more question. I know we have a few questions left, but hopefully those can be answered after the fact through one of the panelists or Del Mackey or something. But let's go one more question. How is IP related information protected in the proposal submissions? Is this something proposers should be wary of, since a lot of agencies use outside review?
Yeah, all of our reviewers are under non-disclosure with us, with NSF, before they're able to review these proposals, and the documents are treated as confidential documents. So I guess with that, so these are not considered public disclosure if you're worried about, the patent filing and things. But having said that, though, I mean, I do let companies know that we do have to have enough details for us to be able to evaluate the technology. But at the same time, if there's a trade secret that's really bread and butter that the company is really worried about, and it's not patent protected, it's a trade secret, they, probably should not disclose it if they don't feel comfortable with it at all. But there has to be a way for us to be able to evaluate. So maybe the company can alleviate that concern a little bit, or help us to be able to evaluate by providing some data that they were able to generate from it, or any other detail that they can provide, so that we can go through that whole review process.
Each agency has a process for how you should identify sensitive proprietary information. Make sure you follow it. And again, the agencies are different, so don't use NSF's version when you're submitting to USDA and vice versa. I echo Henry's comment. You got to put in enough detail that the reviewers understand what you're doing, and that you're for real. You're not snake oil salesman. At the same time, don't give away the store. I had one this week where it is literally the guy just gives his recipe for how you do this, and you don't want to do that and risk that someone unscrupulous is somehow going to get a hold of your proposal and do an end run on you. So enough detail so you can do a good job of reviewing, but not so much detail that it could hurt you if they're not scrupulous.
Okay. It looks like if Matt and Eldon don't have a comment to that, we are about out of time. We are right at 2:30. So I want to say thank you to all of you. And I'm going to turn this back over to Garrett.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, everyone. Henry, Jim, Eldon, and Dr. Willis. That was a great panel about the evolving aspects of these funding opportunities. For everyone watching, we are going to take a quick second break. This is going to give us time to set up for our last panel of the day. So please go and explore the exhibitor hall, head to the lounge and chat with other attendees, and go ahead and just put some resources into your swag bag. We'll be back around 2:50 p.m.